Welcome to the Fuel Pulse Show podcast. I'm your host, Eric Bjornstad, your guide through the ever-changing world of fuel. The Fuel Pulse Show is for anyone who uses fuel or who has things that use fuel, whether at work or at home, and that means it's pretty much for everyone. So you're joining us for a special episode of the Fuel Pulse Show podcast, where we're picking up with a previous discussion that we're having with Corey Agnew, the Director of Fuel Quality for Guardian Fueling Technologies. Now, previously, Corey and I touched on a wide range of topics in the previous episode, all having to do with taking care of fuel and solving fuel problems. So we talked about some interesting questions in the arena of fuel servicing and maintenance, as seen from the perspective of the professionals who have to go out and solve those problems for their customers. So we talked about the difference in how you take care of high-turn fuel versus low-turn fuel. We talked about fuel problems seen in the retail sector that might be a little more common than you might think. We even talked about what the typical service call for a fuel polisher or a fuel service company like Guardian might actually look like if you were the customer. And very importantly, we heard some suggestions from Corey on the most important things that businesses need to do to take care of their stored fuel. So if you missed out on part 1 with Corey, then I'd encourage you to go back and check it out. So in this episode, part 2, we're going to continue our discussion, and we're going to touch on some additional points. We're going to talk about the effect of fuel on today's high-performance Tier 4 diesel engines. We're going to talk about where fuel regulations are headed and where the fuel service industry might be headed in the next 3 to 5 years. We'll even talk about how to tell a good fuel servicing or good fuel polishing company from a bad one. So I really think you're going to enjoy the second part of this discussion with Corey Agnew from Guardian Fueling Technologies. So without any further ado, let's get to it. Well, and what about ISO ratings of the fuel and the fact that those are so for those folks out there that don't know what ISO ratings are in this context, it's basically, as I understand it, a counting, if you will, of the size of particles that are in fuel or whatever liquid you're testing. And so, if you've got Tier 4 common rail diesel engines where the components are required to have performance like we've never seen in the industry, but that means that they are as more sensitive than they've ever been. Yeah, like you said, you can't see the tiny little whatever micron size particles, and those can cause problems.
And those engine manufacturers create warranty. They have warranty language in there that basically says, this engine needs to run on this ISO cleanliness code. And if you exceed that ISO cleanliness code, we're not going to warranty an engine issue.
Sure.
So the fuel is up to the end user. So you may run, let's say, whatever you run a trash company or something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to have a tank in your yard. You're going to have a fuel, somebody delivering fuel.
Yep.
And guys are, your fleet is going to be filling up from that. But at any time, if you're not on top of that contaminant, it's your responsibility at that point of what fuel you're putting into your own vehicles. And if you're not maintaining that fuel, the regulations on fuel and emissions, which I think is a good thing. We want to have less emissions, but it complicates everything. Fuel is no longer just a set it and forget it. It's a maintenance item. You have to maintain it in order to make sure that you're not going to destroy your equipment and spend any more money than you need to, or interrupt your operation.
Yeah, it's like I tell folks, the world is a complicated place, and you've got multiple considerations that you're balancing. And Bell, we've been in the fuel business for over 100 years. Obviously, fuel is Guardian's main thing, but that doesn't mean that either of us are opposed to the trends that they're moving towards on a broader scale for making sure that the environment's clean and they've really done a lot of good work in moving towards that. I mean, if you look at the way that fuel has changed, right? Ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, the whole reason they took out or moved in that direction with taking the sulfur out was because sulfur contributes to bad things in the environment. And they've done a really
Right.
good job over a relatively short period of time in really cleaning that up. And then on the engine side, the engine manufacturers are really smart people. They've developed these really high performance engines that are miles ahead in the cleanliness and the efficiency state or situation than they used to be.
Yep.
And so for me, when I think about how the direction in which things are moving, we've got the federal government giving incentives for electric vehicles, things like that. We generally speaking, I think that's a good thing for the consumer, and it's a good thing for the world in general. And
Yep.
it's not going to do away with our business. It's not going to do away with yours, because there's still going to be plenty of diesel engines and gasoline internal combustion engines out there that are going to need the kinds of things that you do and the kinds of things that we do. So we don't necessarily fear those kind of changes. We think that whatever problems arise, there's going to there's a lot of smart people out there who are going to
Yeah.
come up with
Yeah.
solutions. I remember there was a blog, because I write a lot of the blog articles on the Bell site, and we have a consumer
Mhm.
blog and we have a commercial blog, and we write different types of articles for each. And so one of the things that I wrote a couple articles on electric vehicles and the state of the electric vehicle situation and the problems that they were going to have to overcome in order to meet this ambitious goal that they have. And the one thing that became pretty clear to me as I'm digging into the research and looking at the situation is, yeah, we're not there right now in terms of like charging times, availability of charging infrastructure, stuff like that. If you tried to say everyone has to use an electric vehicle right now, well, of course, that's not going to
That'd
be
be a problem.
feasible. But
Yeah.
they have improved that so much in a relatively short period of time that whatever problems have to be overcome in order to have enough charging stations out there that charge fast enough so that we can have 20 million all electric vehicles out there, they're going to solve it, because that is what we do. Not
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that kind of also speaks to fuel regulations
Uh-huh.
in general. Anyway, they're constantly changing. I mean, we're not at the final version of what diesel fuel is going to be
No.
like, or what ethanol blended gasoline is going to be like. This
No.
is going to continue, and I've said this before. I mean, the fuel regulations are the whole reason that like a position like mine even exists,
Mm-hmm.
is because it's not set it and forget it. It is a maintenance item. Somebody needs to tell you how to make sure that this isn't going to, shut down somebody's car or interrupt your operations, or, just destroy the equipment that you're using. A lot of people, they don't want to think about fuel. They just want that fuel to run whatever their objective for the day is.
Yep.
Get to work.
Get the job done.
Get the trucks out on the road. Yeah. I will say, my trucks, I've had some trucks that have gone down from bad diesel fuel. My fuel guard trucks. It's happened a few times, and we don't, we go out to gas stations. We have like fleet cars and do all that. But if that guys go to the wrong station and all of a sudden the truck starts running really poorly, so it's unfortunately, I think it's a good thing that we are working towards, a cleaner environment, cleaner emissions, and all that. But these are kind of unintended consequences and stuff that I don't think was really considered from all those parties. But that's exactly where a position like mine exists now.
Well, yeah, and government regulations. There's a lot of political debate about the role that government should play and how much it should and should not do, and how much it should or should not tell people what they have to do. But in the end, fuel regulations and engine regulations as well, we'll group those together. Those are the existence of those have a purpose of ostensibly benefiting the greater environment and greater society as a whole by keeping things clean. Also, regulations on fuel requiring fuel to be, of a certain cleanliness level, to meet certain specifications, certain property requirements. Those are for consumer protections, basically, because you need to have confidence if you're a fleet driver or fleet manager, or if you're a consumer gassing up your car. You need to have implicit confidence that when you go to the station, the fuel that you're going to get is going to work as you expect it to, and that it's going to be consistent. The quality is going to be consistent. And if you go to BP over here and get gasoline 87 octane, and then you go over to Chevron over here and get 87 octane, you're going to get relatively the same results. And government regulations and requirements are a big reason why that is true, I think.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we typically will ask for people in different industries like yours is, given you joined the industry in 2016. Before that, you were in, like I said, environmental remediation, but then also in biofuels. You did some interesting things with biofuels. So you've seen a lot of changes that have happened in these different parts of the industry. So specific to what you guys do, if you could sum it up, where do you see the industry going in the next 3 to 5 years? Is there a clear direction?
More fuel regulations. Just to clarify too. So I was in biofuel where we were picking up restaurant grease, filtering out all the food and the water, creating a nice clean feedstock from the stuff that came essentially from a dumpster behind a restaurant, and then converted that into biodiesel. And that biodiesel, we were doing that because there were regulations on incorporating biodiesel into diesel fuel.
Yeah, renewable fuels regulation.
Right. And so from there, I did get into fuel filtering in about 2011. So I've been doing fuel filtering for the petroleum filtering for the past 11 years. And really what I've seen is just going to be more regulation on the fuel that's coming up. And so I don't know specifically how that's going to impact what we see in the field. It'll be something similar to what we're seeing right now, bacteria growing in the fuel, more phase separation of the product actually separating and whatnot. So, and also between the fuel regulations, but also the engine regulations, we're going to have more tiers of
most definitely
that are coming down the road, and those are going to have some sort of different types of tolerances to the fuel. So I'd say in the future, I don't know what the timeline would be for this, but in the future, for the people who are serious about using their fuel, they use a lot, they really rely on fuel. I think there's going to be a lot more people who take charge of their own fuel maintenance.
That's a good thing.
Or are more proactive.
Yeah, another good thing.
I think, a lot of times right now, and it's been like this, for the past 10 years. It's still educate, one at a time, educating clients, telling them how they got to this point, and then what they need to do to prevent this from happening again. Again, because a lot of times the initial conversations that I have are, all these system components are broken down. What do I do to fix this?
How did this happen?
How did this happen? Yeah. And because of those engine regulations, because of the fuel regulations, it's only going to continue, and so getting ahead of it, I think, is going to be the best defense ever, like I said earlier. And I know it's somewhat of a pipe dream, but I'd love to never clean the tank again and just remove the water and treat with chemicals and prevent the contamination from ever occurring.
Yeah. Another thing that we like to ask professionals like yourself are questions that give people information to help them make their own decisions with confidence if it's in an area that's not their primary sphere of expertise. So if I'm an operations manager where I'm in charge of fuel maintenance as part of my overall responsibilities, but it's only one of them. So I'm not a fuel expert. I don't know that much about it, but it's something that I have to, be concerned about. And so, first of all, I might not have any idea if/when I need something like fuel polishing or fuel servicing, the kind of things that you guys do. But let's say that I think that I do. So then for me, the most pressing issue I would think would be, how do I know who is a good one versus who is a bad one? Because I've heard that there are plenty of, shall we say, shady operators out there. So given how long you've been in the industry, what advice would you give to an operations manager or a fuels professional who thinks that they might need some professional help for problem assessment or tank cleaning? They may not know exactly what they need, but they know they need to engage somebody like you, but they're not sure which company is the best and what makes one company better than the other. So what would be the general things you would advise them to look for besides giving them your number and saying, call us anyway?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I came to Guardian is fantastic. First of all, I really like working with Guardian. One of the reasons I came to Guardian was because we had the service side and the ability to fix all the other stuff that's related.
Yeah.
So I think that's one important aspect, because you can have a fuel cleaning company go out and just address the fuel, but maybe they don't have the certifications to deal with the probe or to pull the motor.
So certifications are an important aspect of this.
Certifications are an important aspect of it. Yes, absolutely. Because again, if you're going to have a company that comes out and only treats the fuel, you're likely going to have to hire another company that comes out to whatever, change the filters at the dispenser or change an eco meter or something like that, change a meter, So that is, one aspect that I think is important in finding the right company. You alluded to it a little bit too. I mean, there are some, I'm sure, just like with any business, there's good and bad, there's honest, there's dishonest and stuff. I think because it's something that you're cleaning that you can't see, the client can't see, it could be easy to cheat. But
yeah,
if you don't know about these things, I'd say, first of all, ask the manager, who, a person like me, drill into every question you could possibly have. How do they verify? How do we verify that we've cleaned the tank properly? How are they going to verify as well? There are, there are generator clients where when we're filtering out on site and our technicians, they have their own steps for verifying that they're done cleaning the tank. But there are also clients where at the end, we collect tank bottom samples to show them, from across the tank. This is what the bottom of the tank currently looks like. But also, you can send that stuff to a lab and have the lab provide the numbers that says that we've done our job as well. I will offer for somebody, because this does happen, let's fuel contamination creeps up on them. They've never had to deal with it before. It's not in the budget. How do they know that they
don't know that much about it? So
exactly. So, for me, I'm happy to explain all the options that we can do too. There's also different levels of the service. I don't treat every tank the same. We have generalities of like doing a bottom sweep and a treatment, or a full polishing, or sometimes like a gamma jet or a Butterworth. And that's when you pull all the fuel out of the tank and wash the inside. There's a time and a place for a variety of how to tackle this problem. If you can't get a straight answer from somebody on that, then it's not good. But also, any client, I'm happy to get our clients their own sampling equipment, and then that also gives them the opportunity to sample behind us, maybe when we're not on site. Did we actually collect the right samples from the right spots and all that stuff? Just double check after people, really.
Yeah, it sounds to me like one of the things that separates the good ones from the not so good ones are the good ones have the ability to effectively do multiple different kinds of things that may need to be done. So they have the certifications. They have people who are experienced in doing that, but they also should. They should, at the very least, operate from the standpoint that the problem that they're being brought in to solve could have any number of solutions, and that they can't be like the proverbial, to a man with a hammer, everything's a nail type thing. It's not, everything has to be polished. It may not need to be polished. There could be any number of things that need to be done. And So I would say, interpreting your answer, one of the big things that a person, if I'm that operations manager, one of the big things I could use to tell a good one from a bad one is how willing and able is that fuel service person. How willing and able are they to explain the differences and explain why one thing may need to be done versus another? Because it is complicated. It's not always a simple answer.
Yeah, yeah, and in addition to that, I think it's important that on their own they can go and sample the
Yes.
tanks. It's always good to put eyeballs on your own tanks. And we can not only provide all the equipment to do that, but the knowledge and training
Yeah.
for them of what they should be doing on a monthly basis. What are your checks that you should be doing every month?
Yeah.
What should you be doing every quarter?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one thing that we try to do on our side with Bell. I mean, we have a service component, but our primary business that we got involved in way back in 1909 was chemicals, and we know there's lots of, shall we say, shady fuel additives out there, and for good reason, because it's something people don't really know that much about, and so one of the things that we try to do is we try to explain to people what something's going to do when you need something versus when you don't need something, because very often they won't need what they think they need. And so what you're talking about is the fuel service equivalent of that. That whether it's us or whether it's our area or whether it's yours, people are smart. They can look things up on the internet. And so,
get a second opinion.
Yeah. I mean, the internet is, you can have bad information out there on the internet, as we know, but there's also plenty of good information. And
you're gonna find tons of fuel contamination too.
All right. Well, last couple of questions here. What's the well, actually, I was going to ask what's the most unusual situation that your technicians have been called out to try and fix, but I think you already answered that because you got crazy iguanas running around in South Florida.
That was one weird one. I'd say we also, there are times that we've got to assess problems and we don't know exactly what's going on, maybe intermittent slow flow.
Yep.
In situations like that, sometimes it's rags that fall into tanks. We do see that fairly often.
Rags, okay. Have you ever pulled something really weird out?
Yeah, vape cartridges.
Ooh, yeah.
Dead animals, like birds.
Okay.
One of my guys, I didn't see this one, but one of my guys found a shopping cart in a bulk tank.
How that begs the question, so how does one get a shopping cart in a bulk tank?
Without being able to get the shopping cart out. So we suspect that they were doing repairs on the bulk tank, and then they were using a shopping cart inside to make the repairs, and then once the repairs were done, they
forgot, or they
realized, we can't get this.
They couldn't be bothered to get it out.
Yeah.
Well,
and in another instance, one of my technicians found what looks to be like drugs. Like it came through the filter. It was like a wrapped up
a bag.
It was like falling apart, but it was like wrapped up plastic with some duct tape and a white mushy. It was just it was strange. It was weird.
Not something you expect to find.
No. But I also know that there's cell phones on the bottoms of tanks. There's samplers on the bottoms of tanks. There's people drop stuff down there all the time when they're motor oil too, cross contaminants. I've seen that where people are dropping either they're I think what ends up happening is maybe somebody who wants to get rid of something. Maybe they've got a bunch of motor oil. They go to a station and they kind of discreetly drop it down in there. Surfactants too. That's happened sometimes, where we've had diesel fuel that was just super hydrated, and we couldn't do anything about, which is strange. Everything we threw at it, nothing would be fixed, and in those situations, end up sending it to a lab saying, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they'll come back and identify weird chemicals that are in there.
Something in there shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, I've seen bubbling gasoline before. I'll have to send you the
Bubbling
video
gasoline.
clip that it had. I'm not joking. Like a sample, we do the 4-ounce jars,
Yeah.
and it was a gasoline sample, a lot of rust in it.
Yep.
But when our tech put it on the back of the truck, it was just full bore, like
Wow.
just bubbling.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
it
Maybe.
was.
Yeah. If you send us the video, we can post up. We can put a link to it in the show notes so that
Yeah, it,
folks can
it,
look
it was
at
very
that.
weird.
Huh.
I'll send you a bunch of different photos too. I've got photos of
Yeah.
gummed up probes and corroded STPs and
Yeah, that might be good
thousands.
for folks, yeah, to be able to look at so that they can, because they hear you and I talk
I can
about
see
things
it.
like, corroded probes, that things like that, but
Yeah,
it's helpful many times to see visual examples of that, and then they say, well, that's what I happen to see in my tank, and so maybe that means
right.
I need to go do something about it. Yeah.
Some other weird situations. I don't think the weird situations are ever going to stop. They just
No.
get less and less frequent,
Yep.
especially as you get more and more experience. But I've done thousands of tanks at this point, and
Mm-hmm.
um, there's it. I don't think it's ever going to really, stop 100% of all the
No.
weird stuff that we see.
No, because I've often say around here, I say, you try to make things idiot proof, but some
Yep,
idiots are smarter than others, and
yep, yep.
people will always
Now,
find a way.
yeah, there are also just tricky situations sometimes too. So when we're cleaning fuel, I always have my guys do a water intrusion check
Yep.
ahead of time because I don't want to go and clean fuel where I know water's actively getting into the tank because
No.
you're just not going to make any progress
No.
on that, right? And so if there have been situations where we'll do a water intrusion check and it's a visual inspection and that may come up clean, but there may be water getting in from another point. Maybe
Yep.
it's the vent pipe or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. There's one that in those situations we then may ask to get a tightness test done. So a company
Okay.
can come out and test the tank and see where there might be leaks of that you
Yeah.
can't see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
aren't. It'll identify where that leak is coming from. So, and there have been situations where those tests come back, oh, it's fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's tight, it's tight. And then the tank, we go back the next day and there might be a little bit more water in there. And so
Okay.
there's a little bit of a conflict. Well, we've found situations where the tank was only taking on water when the motor was on. So when
Ah.
somebody's at the dispenser, it was like enough vibration
Uh-huh.
to allow that water to get through a tiny area in a gasket, but it was
Yep.
only when the motor was on,
Yep.
and so it's going through there's a lot of different diagnostics to understand not only the
Mm-hmm.
health of the fuel, but essentially the health of the system.
Well, yeah, and it
And is it
sounds,
really?
yeah, it sounds like because there are situations where the answer is not apparent, that, going back to the question of what should somebody look for, they need to, whatever service company they're thinking about, engaging to solve whatever problem they think they have, they need to have the ability to walk through these steps and the expectation that the answer may not be cut and dried and simple as, oh yeah, you need to do this. It may be something
Right.
that needs to have a little bit more investigation because things are not always that simple.
That's correct. And I'd say along with that, choose a company that has the equipment like loads with the parts on the way
Yep.
there, that kind of has the kitchen sink in the back of the
Yep.
truck if that's necessary. It's
Yep.
not always necessary.
No.
A lot of times these are very standard cleanings and and
Mm-hmm.
and, and run of the mill, just fixing the contamination. But
Yep.
at other times weird stuff happens,
Yep.
and just you should be prepared
Yeah.
and have diagnostic steps in order to work through
Yep.
those.
All right. Well, Corey, last question. I heard an ugly rumor that you're a podcast guy, that while you may not
I do.
film a
I
lot of
like that.
podcasts, you do like to listen to them. And in that respect, I think we're both the same, because I do like a good podcast. Hopefully, the Fuel Pulse show will, we'll work towards
Somebody subscribes.
making one of those. But so, what are your favorite podcasts to listen to these days?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the first podcast that I've participated in, and when you asked me, I was like, heck yes, absolutely. I'm definitely a podcast fanboy. I am also a little bit of a Bitcoin nerd and
Uh-huh.
cryptocurrency nerd, so I listen to a lot of different crypto like news shows.
Okay.
I'll listen to Rogan. I do a lot of Audible too.
Yep.
I'll listen to a lot of music, but definitely, I like sci-fi books. Tim Ferriss as well on
Yeah. Yeah.
podcasts. I'll listen to a little bit of everything. I do like some of that self-help stuff. It helps me kind of think about things and maybe going about things in a different way. But yeah, I think it's almost overwhelming now too of how many shows are out there. So
Yes.
I feel like every 4 months or 5 months or something, I'll just like purge what I'm listening to,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll go with like a few other shows to try it out. But I like listening to a lot of
Well,
just learning about different stuff.
well, one of the ones I don't know if you've listened to this or not, and this will be a free shout out to this guy. Have you ever listened to a podcast called The Art of Manliness?
No, I have not.
That would be right up your alley. It's been
I'll
going
write it
on
down.
for about maybe 10 years now, and each episode, the host picks a topic. Brett McKay is the host, and
Okay.
he'll pick a topic, and he'll usually do what we're doing. He'll talk. It may be somebody who's written a book or somebody's got some experience in the field, and there are
Cool.
all sorts of it's a very wide ranging topic base. I mean, some of them are practical, some of them are things like what can Aristotle teach us about living today, or why you should read Cormac McCarthy's The Road every year if you're a man, to how to raise sons in the digital age. It's
That's
really,
cool.
yeah, it's
I like
really
that.
interesting. That's definitely one I listen to a lot. You probably would like that too. So free shout out to The Art of Manliness by Brett McKay.
Let's give one more shout out. Have you listened to Hardcore History with Dan Carlin?
I don't think I have, but I have heard of it, I think.
That is a phenomenal one. He puts in a tremendous amount of work into these, and I'm not a big history guy, but
No, I
he
do
has a
like
way of
history.
yeah, but he has a way of just explaining and really putting you into the time. There was one that he did about Genghis Khan,
Ooh,
and the Mongols. It was like a five-parter,
yeah,
just phenomenal. It was probably each one is like 3 hours. It's just a tremendous amount of knowledge. So
that is hardcore.
when I talk to people and they don't listen to podcasts or have never
Hmm.
heard a podcast, it just blows my mind because there is something for everybody out there.
You are exactly right.
Everybody.
Yep.
It's overwhelming,
Yep.
which is out there.
Well, and hopefully the Fuel Pulse show will become part of that pantheon, because we're going to be aiming to have something that appeals to a wide variety of people. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that next time that we have you on, because there's so much that we could talk about, definitely going to have you back on to talk about some of these and things that you mentioned, and
Absolutely.
some other things. So we'll talk some more about some of the other podcasts that we've found. So Corey, yeah, it's been a real pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your expertise and your perspective. It's really been a blast. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, sir. I enjoyed it.
So that about wraps things up for today's episode of the Fuel Pulse Show. Thank you very much for spending part of your day with us, or night, depending on when you're listening to this. Check the show notes on the website for links to things that we talked about, like maybe some of those pictures and videos that Corey's going to send us. Those are at bellperformance.com. Please make sure, of course, to subscribe to this podcast in iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. And then last but not least, if you liked what you heard, then please leave us a review at your preferred site, because that is one of the best ways to help people find us. So bye-bye, everyone. We'll catch you next time on the next episode of the Fuel Pulse Show podcast.